Okay, I'm live. I am live. Yes, sir. I'm actually I don't know, what am I, 30 seconds or a minute late here? I was just doing some finishing touches there. Anyways, so thanks for you folks who have joined already. Really appreciate that. Today I'm going to be covering, hopefully this live stream is not going to be too awfully long. It's just one thing that I actually wanted to cover. And, well, obviously, as you folks know, the big thing around here is, well, you sure as hell can't expect, the political class, right, to be there to defend your freedoms. Because as we see, no matter which side of the political divide gets into power, yeah, that's the thing. Their jobs seemingly, this is the problem with having full-time politicians, where they sit around and just conjure up ideas, right? Literally, it's an excuse to give themselves something to do, is to constantly think about ways to micromanage every aspect of our social and economic lives, to come up with legislation. I mean, once again, our country started out, this is the thing that people don't understand, and that whole boiling frog approach, or the death by 1,000 cuts, is, you know, when these countries were set up, on Canada's case, 160 or so years ago, in the US's case, 200 some years ago, or in some of the countries over across the pond, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? But this is the problem. At least historically, and very early on in our country, such as Canada, US, there wasn't even a pretense of having just politicians that get paid all day, every day. Well, I mean, not like they work all day, but get paid to basically put in full-time hours to, once again, sit around, figure out ways to micromanage and try to control every aspect of our social and economic lives. And that's something that I wish it wasn't the case. I wish each generation, this is a failure on just the average Canadian citizens, behalf, right? So if this is, and I mean, I grew up in that scenario myself. Nobody told the things that I needed to learn. I basically had to figure all this stuff out on myself. And once again, now that it's late in the stage, what was it? Probably in my early 40s. Yeah, right around when I was 40 years old, basically, is when I really started getting into learning all this stuff, philosophy and how government, what is government? What does it mean to be a free human being? And I mean, it was a long, arduous, but fruitful journey and meaningful journey along the way. It's helped me tremendously to get to the point where I am today. But once again, now I'm fortunate, and my children are fortunate, my sons are fortunate, the fact that I'm the kind of person that does, try to pass on, and I have passed on a lot of that knowledge, not just to my sons, but their friends, the ones that are willing to listen and stuff, and then other people, like people that I work with, stuff. But outside of a small minority group of people like us, most of Canadians, most citizens, most people in society don't truly understand. This is the thing. When you're born into big government, you just think that that's just the way things go. And you've probably heard that. Well, it is the way it is. What can you do, right? It's just the way the system works. It's like, well, I first of all, I can't stand that kind of defeatist mindset. And I will just point out that those kind of people that have that defeatist mindset, well, they're never the ones that actually change anything. Obvious. I mean, that's blatantly obvious. But once again, at the very least, now this example we're going to be dealing with today is, it's not just that in the political realm. As you folks know, the bureaucracy, the deep state, if you want to call it, right, which is basically the bureaucracy, are the institutions, like in terms of education, like politics. Once again, I mean, there's just so many areas of our culture that's dominated by big government, by statists, by people who are true blue believers. But I will just say, once in a while, you get people who are part of the state, part of that state apparatus, who at least try once in a while. Usually it's when they're not in any position of power anymore, right? Maybe I don't know if they have the ability. That's the thing. There's so many non-disclosures, right, agreements and stuff that people have signed too. So do you really get to learn the inner thoughts of a lot of these people? No, because they're basically silenced, right? That's basically a terms of their occupation is, yeah, you can work for government, but yeah, you're going to have to be silenced. You can't talk about this stuff. Meanwhile, that's the other thing. Isn't the whole pretense of government is supposed to be transparent because we the people are their employers, right? We pay their salaries. But once again, if you're the one paying the salaries, shouldn't you have a means to fire them when they're doing wrong instead of having to rely on everybody agree with you? This is the problem with democracy, is we already know that there's a substantial portion of the Canadian population. We're seeing now numbers up to as high as 70%. Now, this is polling numbers, but up to as high as 70% of Canadians are sick and tired of Trudeau, and they just want him and the Liberals gone, out of power. But once again, how try to translate that into the real world? Well, no, you got to wait for whenever, if things continues to prop up, right? Be Trudeau's little lapdog right out until whenever 2025 is. Well, it'll happen when they decide to call an election and not until. So are you really employer? Right? No, I don't think so. And have you actually agreed to, basically be able to get by yourself but yet to pay these people that basically their jobs could cease to exist tomorrow, and actually we'd be much better off, but you prop these people up with salaries that are completely outstripped from anything that the actual productive, the working classes make. And even those, once again, even in the middle class in terms of the working type people, right? The ones that are productive in whether it's the fruits of their labor or their intellect. But we all pale in comparison, not just the kind of the salaries that these folks get, but the gold-plated pension. That's a big contributing factor too. But once again, anyways, me, I could ramble on about when you're talking about big government, that's for sure. But anyways, like I said, I do want to cover this article. It is from, I will just say it's a Hub exclusive. Not sure if you folks go over onto the Hub. It's a news outlet there. It's an alternative news outlet. It's thehub.ca, and you get some of the disenfranchised folks from the used to work for some of the former establishment media outlets, but now they gone out. The ones that are frustrated and tired of being silenced and having their voices suppressed themselves. So they ventured out and now are contributing to not just things like Substack, which there are definitely some contributors out there as well, but to this other news organization, or it's not just news. There's a lot of things on it, but it's called the hub.ca. And this is an actual Hub exclusive. So I will just shout out to the Hub for presenting this. I've had this kind of sitting in the background now for at least a couple weeks, but I figured, you know what? It's damn near time that I get this thing sent out. But anyways, before I actually do, let me just make sure that all is going well on all the platforms here, because that's something I typically like to do while I let people stream in to the live stream. So let's see here. Let's make sure everything's going good. Why does that say starting soon? No, it should be started already. Let's just reload here. Maybe that's possibly why. Okay. No, we're good. We are good. Right on. Yeah, we're good over on. So right now I can say that Odyssey's working good. Let me just check on the Rumble. And actually, while I'm waiting for the Rumble to load, let me check on the YouTube. Yep. Yeah, so everything's looking good on the old YouTube. And one other thing, I will check out X here. Just let me check out X, folks. Make sure people know. I'll actually just give a little shout out to suggest, hey, I'm live. I'm live over here. If anyone cares. If anyone cares, I'm live. Check the pulse. And yeah, it's true. I am live. So yeah, so I just put that out there on X, the platform X, which once again, at least got to be thankful that we do have X, right? Some of the other social media platforms. Actually, I will just point out, weirdly enough, I don't know if it's because Facebook went down for a little while, but I have had a couple of my posts on my Canadian Libertarian Facebook page, and I don't know if you folks that watch me regular are also aware that, yeah, I had some real issues there. Like, I don't know. I was kind of like in Facebook jail there for, it seemed like probably bumping up on a month, I believe. And once again, there was some other stuff that happened. Then, of course, the other day, Facebook went down. I think it went down one of the times when I was live streaming as well. But whatever they've done to get everything back up, I don't know. Somehow I must have managed to slip through the cracks of the algorithm, the suppressive algorithm that is basically put out there. and placed on all of the social media accounts of people like myself. Why? Because they don't want my voice to get out there. But that's the thing. I kind of have to rely on folks like yourself, those who do watch the live stream. Yeah, I'm not going to get any help from like I say, the big players in particular in terms of, trying to get my content out there, right? It's not in their best interest, let's say, for a lot of them. But I can rely on the folks like yourself. That's kind of way we circumvent that kind of control, that tight grip they have on the kind of information that gets pushed around. Is actually, if you folks would just do a good deed there and just share it yourself. Share this live stream right now. Let people that that I am live streaming, so they get a chance to check it out as well. Or even if they don't have time to watch it now, maybe just let them know that, hey, there's this guy, Canadian Libertarian. He does some pretty good shit there on his live streams, talks about a lot of really, not just the issues of the day, but always with once again, the liberty-oriented lens. That's why I call typically a lot of my live streams the liberty angle, right? Is because, yes, every story that I deal with, I take the liberty angle and deal with things from the point of liberty, of individual freedom and liberty. That's, making sure, you deal with the proper ethics of things, right? Rather than just playing the left versus right or red versus blue, right? My team versus your team, the whole tribalism thing, which does seem to be very dominant these days. Everyone seemingly is siloed now. The left and right have siloed themselves so much that, yeah, people like myself that don't function in either of those echo chambers, that's why we're finding ourselves out here. And I mean, not completely isolated. I get a fair amount of views, right? And some good people that watch my content, but pale in massive comparison to the people that have just said, you know what? I'm choosing team A over team B, or I'm choosing team conservative over team liberal, or I'm choosing team Republican, like team Trump, over team Democrats, right? Or, in the UK, team Labor versus the team, the Tories, or whatever. You know how it's going, right? It's the whole left versus right thing. And once again, here we are out basically, and those of us who don't fit into either of those categories so neatly, yeah, we're basically out in obscurity there, kind of function all on our own. But in a way, that's kind of how we typically like it. So anyways, but like I said, let me just make sure I'm going to close up a couple of my pages here so I get, actually, let me just check on the Facebook too, because this should be live streaming on the Facebook. Let's see here if this is going as of yet. Yeah, it looks like it's actually rocking over on the old Facebook. But anyways, like I was saying, strangely, oddly enough, on Facebook, a couple of my posts, my reach for the past 28 days has now exceeded, it's just actually hasn't exceeded yet. It's just under 200,000. What was it this morning? It was around 196,000, right, in terms of post reach. And I mean, there's some of the posts I put up on there that have gotten thousands of likes, thousands of shares, and thousands of comments. So really grateful for whatever the hell happened, right, that actually allowed that to take place. I'll take it, whatever it takes, right, so that I can actually at least get my content on here. Let me beat that out there a little bit more to people, because once again, even though they're only seeing a particular post, but at the very least, now they see where that post originated from, aka Canadian Libertarian, and I'm seeing that they're actually following me much more. My actual followers over on the Canadian Libertarian Facebook page have jumped up by almost 400 in just like the past week, or just over a week, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. So anyways, like I say, let me just take the old Facebook situation out of here. Put that back down below. And let me get to the article at hand. Yeah, now that I've shared everything on X as well, let me just bring up this article. Oh, actually, wait, there's a couple questions, or a couple comments, I should say. Let me just check on them real quick. Do you know any info about the court case against the EMA in Moncton that happened yesterday? EMA in Moncton. Not familiar with that. Did I see something about that? No, actually, I can't say that I am aware of that 506 adventure. I may check into that after I do this live stream, though. Now that you've mentioned it, I may very well take the time to look into that. But thanks for pointing that out. But sorry, I don't have any information for you at this particular time. Hey, David, what's up, man? Really appreciate you joining the live stream as well. Anyways, like I say, there's some folks in the not just in the chat, but also I see that are watching live stream. So let me just get to this article at hand. Oh, by the way, I'm sure you folks have probably already noticed. Yeah, I did a little change up in the old background here, and have to give a shout out to my wife for helping me with the idea, not just the ideas, but even I did some painting. Yeah, I might even look that I'm in a completely different spot, but no, I'm in the same spot. Just like I say, I like to change things up once in a while, right? I guess that's the thing, right? That's why no matter what you're talking about, like I'm not like a conservative where it's like I just got to conserve everything all times, just nothing ever changes, right? Now that's not me, right? But I'm also not a progressive where I think that I have to, smash and destroy everything that deals with anything remotely resembling conservatism. That's that kind of happy medium that I found, not just in my personal life, right? But in basically all other areas and aspects of my life. And I guess that plays right into the whole political realm too, which is why I don't see eye to eye for the most part, which is weird though, right? Because a lot of these people, they all claim to be, benevolent actors or trying to do things for what they perceive as this greater good, the concept of the greater good, or they want to be public servants, or they want to serve the public in some capacity. That's the never-ending rhetoric you get. But once again, reality over rhetoric is what I say. And that's something I noticed over the course of my entire life, adult life and in childhood is, yeah, you really do have to judge people based on their actions, not just the rhetoric, because the rhetoric and their actions don't necessarily line up. And matter of fact, in many times, in particular nowadays, they're the exact opposing, in terms of what they stand for. But anyways, like I say, let me get into this Hub article. And we'll just, like I say, this shout out to the Hub and shout out to the folks who put this up there. Anyway, so this is a Hub exclusive, like I say, Supreme Court Justice Malcolm Rowe on postmodernism, democracy, and judicial overreach. So, nice to know what some figureheads that are, obviously part and parcel of government and part of, the Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land in Canada, right? What they have to say in terms of postmodernism, democracy, and judicial overreach. It's kind of something that I think most people should be concerned about. So this is the 2024 Runnymede Society keynote lecture, and it was delivered by, once again, Supreme Court Justice Malcolm Rowe. This was posted by the Hub staff, February 5th, 2024. This past weekend, 200 lawyers, law students, and scholars from across Canada gathered at the University of Toronto's Hart House for the 7th annual Runnymede Society Conference. Entitled Law and Freedom 2024, the event addressed everything from how we should view the Emergencies Act, following a landmark federal court ruling that found its one and only use unconstitutional, to free expression, to federalism. And actually, let me just point out about this Emergency Act. Yes, it was not just unconstitutional. What does that mean? Think about it from the judicial aspect. What does it mean? It means that the federal government broke not just the law, but the supreme law of the land, right? The highest court represents the highest laws of the land were broken by the federal government. And what punishment are we seeing today? After Judge Mosley handed down a decision, literally said that the government broke the law of the land. So you got a bunch of criminals. That's what happens when you break the supreme law of any land, of any jurisdiction, is you aren't just, you're not just a lowly petty thug or a petty criminal or a petty thief, right? No, you broke the highest law. And once again, think of what they did, right? Confiscating, seizing bank accounts, seizing property, private property in terms of trucks or RVs and putting people in jail, right? Running them through these kangaroo courts, these lower level courts. And even the whole idea of the innocent until presumption of guilt, or innocent until proven guilty. The presumption of innocence until proven guilty, right? Before you've actually had your day in court. That is something that is non-existent in so many areas, applicable areas of law in Canada. And yet, what the hell? This is the thing. It's an open secret, which is not a secret, that not just this federal government, but multiple jurisdictions, multiple governments, in particular, just in recent years as it pertains to COVID, the mandates, the restrictions, the lockdowns, all that shit, right? Broke the law and did very unethical things, and at scale, not just to an individual or a few individuals, but at scale, that affected millions of people. And yet, who's being punished? Who's, like, once again, if you break the law, you commit a crime, and you're caught doing so, then you're going to be punished. And no matter what level of punishment it is, even at the lowest level, it's still more than what anyone in government so far has suffered as a consequence for, like I say, breaking the supreme law of the land and causing tremendous hardships. And who knows, like I say, I won't even get into how much more, like the potential causes of death, based on the false presumption and pretense that the vaccines were going to protect you and the vulnerable people around you. I mean, there are some lawsuits taking place, but once again, no serious consequences have been suffered by the kind of people that implemented these draconian measures on the entire Canadian population and in populations all around the world. And I will just point out too, it's strange, in case you folks aren't aware of, it's strange. I'm even seeing today that there's the Irish folks just across the pond from us here on the old East Coast, right? Literally across the pond, if you're on the Rock, which is actually where this minister or this judge, this Supreme Court judge, this justice, he's originally from Newfoundland. And what was that premier? I forget. Was it Brian? No, not Brian. But remember that one premier, the former premier from Newfoundland, the former Newfoundland premier. I forget his name. His name's escaped me right now. But it's funny how the Irish, which is what they would be, although they call themselves Newfoundlanders these days, right? But their heritage would be Irish. As it seems that they seem to, at least those two in particular, seem to be really willing to go against the status quo. And you can't help but think, that kind of mental psychology, right, in terms of your history or in your heritage of not going along with everything in terms of the British Empire and challenging and pushing back and maybe rising up against. Also, there is a little bit of a rebellious spirit and mentality in some of the Irish, even those that go into politics or in the judicial classes these days, and are at least willing to speak vocally and openly against some of this top-down authoritarianism that's been taking place. But yeah, I found it strange that even in the UK and in Ireland, they're basically doing these hate speech bills and laws and trying to bring them to fruition basically about the same time that they're doing so in Canada. Why is there such a coordinated and concerted effort when it comes to top-down central planning, right? Wow. Anyways, yeah, that's another thing. Actually, I was reading again the Communist Manifesto, and like I say, the communists, right? They wanted to take their ideology worldwide, and in some way in this modern world, it almost seems like, damn it, they've managed to accomplish it, right? It's not a fait accompli as of yet, but they've definitely got quite a few of the tenets of communism already implemented and permeating through our cultures. But anyways, let me just read on a little bit more here. Founded in 2016, the Runnymede Society is a nonpartisan organization of lawyers, law students, and legal scholars that describes itself as being committed to the principles of constitutionalism, the rule of law, and fundamental freedoms. The group can be broadly characterized as right of center, with many of its members identifying as, get this, folks, libertarian, classically liberal, and conservative. A product of the Canadian Constitutional Foundation, the Society produces original debates, journal publications, and networking opportunities meant to challenge conventional thinking in Canada's legal community. It now boasts or boast chapters in many of Canada's law schools. So this is kind of a, that's kind of a good thing, right? In terms of, you're seeing that this group, they're broadly characterized as right of center, with many of its members identifying as libertarian first and foremost, even before classically liberal and conservative. So that's an important thing. If there are, institutions, once again, think tanks and others that do have a healthy dose of libertarian thought and philosophy, because you just know yourself, if there's a libertarian in the room, right, there's definitely going to be vigorous and voiceless debate as it pertains to government. So yeah, your liberties and your freedoms are always much, much more, or at least has the potential to be much more secure when there's at least one or more libertarians in terms of in these kinds of fields or these kinds of organizations. We cannot take for granted intellectual diversity in the legal profession, insisted outgoing Runnymede Society National Director Christopher Kissinger, kicking off this year's series of discussions. The 2024 keynote lecture was delivered by Supreme Court Justice Malcolm Rowe. The Hub's managing editor, Harrison Lohman, was there to cover the address. Below is an exclusive excerpt from his speech entitled Constitutionalism in a Free and Democratic Society. What is the impact on democratic institutions of an expanding role by courts in determining public policy? My focus isn't on what courts do or how they do it. Rather, it is on the consequences of courts expanding public policy role on the operation of democratic institutions. 40 years ago, Peter Russell predicted that political issues would be transformed into legal ones. He expressed concern with what he called the negative side of transferring policymaking from the legislative to the judicial arena. This transfer, he wrote, represents a further flight from politics, a deepening disillusionment with the procedures of representative government and of government by discussion as a means of resolving fundamental questions of political justice. 30 years ago, in Judicial Power and the Charter, Christopher Manfredi was even more direct. He warned of an imperial judiciary whose authority would undercut democratic institutions. He wrote, "The problem with judicial social engineering is that the attempt to correct the errors of democratic institutions through litigation risks undermining the capacity for self-government on which liberal democracy ultimately depends. Too great a reliance on litigation can both exacerbate social conflict and enervate public discussion of important political questions." 20 years ago, in The Charter Revolution, Morton and Knopf wrote that, encouraged by the judiciary's more active policymaking role, interest groups have increasingly turned to the courts to advance their policy objectives. Not only are judges now influencing public policy to a previously unheard of degree, but lawyers and legal arguments are increasingly shaping political discourse and policy formation. They conclude that liberal democracy works when majorities rather than minorities rule, and when it is obvious to all that ruling majorities are themselves coalitions of minorities in a pluralistic society. Partisan opponents must nevertheless be seen as fellow citizens who might be future allies. Representative institutions facilitate this fundamental democratic disposition. Judicial power undermines it. Recently, Dave Snow and Ted Morton wrote in Law, Politics, and the Judicial Process, 4th edition, that to adapt Peter Russell's formulation, if populism reflects a flight from representative government and government by decision, deciding policy under the Charter represents a further flight. Mark Harding's book, Judicializing Everything, addresses these issues at length. These political scientists share the view that for democratic institutions to function properly, there needs to be a practical incentive to force compromise, to compel participants to make deals, to accommodate one another. Those who cooperate to get things done differ from issue to issue, so that there's no permanent majority on all issues. Thus, exclusive groupings tend not to form. When I studied political science, this was called brokerage politics. It led to big tent political parties that brought together a wide range of interests. For example, there were red Tories and blue liberals and pragmatic prairie-style NDPers, all of whom had much in common. Within a political party, within a caucus, and within a cabinet, no group could have their way all the time. Pragmatism and moderation were needed in order to get things done. Well, this is the thing with what I suggest, anyways. So once again, whether they're talking about, whether it should be the judiciary has more of a role or politics, the political classes, why to me, I would just say to this judge, why not make, considering the fact that even in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it even acknowledges that the rule of law is based on the supremacy of God, right? It literally states it right within Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because at least the English-speaking world, and I would even suggest the French, because they, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, basically are Christians, come from the Christian faith themselves, the Judeo-Christian background and heritage, is since laws are supposed to be based and built upon actual universally consistent ethics, right? Which is what the supremacy of God represents, then why should it be subjected to the political process or to be interpreted by a bunch of atheists in these courts who don't even believe in the supremacy of God or the supremacy of universal ethics? Because that, at the end of the day, is the biggest problem facing all of Western societies, all Western countries, and all areas of not just politics, but the judiciary and anything that has to do with what it is to be a free human being in each and every one of our countries. Is if laws were actually built and based upon, and once again, whether they're passed, removed, or updated in some way by what's considered the political class, so the legislature in Canada, the House of Commons and the Senate. Once again, if all of those, right, this is the thing. So we talk about the PMO, so that'd be the executive in Canada, right? Whereas the president's, the president of the United States office of the United States would be the same thing as the PMO, the Prime Minister's office in Canada. So that's the executive class. Then you got, like I say, the House of Commons and the Senate, which is supposed to represent the legislative branch of government. And then the Supreme Court, the provincial courts, the Court of Appeals, right? Court of King's Bench, all those, the courts are supposed to represent, that's the judicial branch of government. So we're supposed to have three branches of government. So, and they're all supposed to keep everyone in check. The problem is all three branches of government these days are playing politics, right? And doing everything that is the exact opposite of acknowledging and recognizing the supremacy of God or the rule of law, which is, once again, just another way of saying laws that are based and built upon the respect and acknowledgement of individual rights and freedoms and the supremacy of universal ethics. So in other words, even the very fact that we have taxation. Now, of course, people use political language to suggest, oh, it's taxation with representation, because somehow if you agree through this social contract, which most of us never do, but even if they pretend that the social contract is by sheer fact that, hey, did you fill your taxes? Okay, then you agree to the social contract. Even if that's a pretense, then once again, how could anyone who would in the right mind would agree to participate in any kind of system where nobody's holding themselves to the same standard that they try to hold the average citizen to, right? If the average citizen are the ones that are supposed to be the democracy, are supposed to, once again, uphold the law and do the right thing, do what's just, and all three levels of government are supposed to be there to protect or to defend or to correct any of those things that go against them. So if you in the private realm for an individual, right? If you rob from someone or you steal from someone, you have committed a crime. And there's not going to be any political legalese or political language that would try to be entered into the courtroom to suggest that no, I was just borrowing it. Or, oh no, this person by sheer fact that they didn't have the like 3 locks on their door. Well, that was basically a written invitation anyway, right? Nobody would misconstrue or try to suggest that in an actual court of law for like I say, the average citizen. But oddly and strangely enough, when it comes to the political class, right? Or even these judges stuff, that's the thing. When you're a function or you function under, or you're part and parcel of the government, first of all, your income is coming as a consequence by the proceeds of theft. People don't get to choose to opt in or opt out to pay for once again, whether you're on the judiciary, all the bureaucracy of the judiciary, or even the politicians. No, they're the ones that get to choose even when they get a raise. They get to write. Like, could you imagine getting to write legislation, or you're employed by an employer and you don't even have to rely on the employer giving you a raise? No, you can just say, oh, I want to write myself and give myself a raise. Nobody, once again, government and all 3 branches of government basically do things that are antithetical to those universal ethics, which is supposed to be based and built upon all the laws of the land in this country. That supremacy of ethics, the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So how could you ever hope to have anything work out right? Whether, like I say, it's coming from the judiciary, or it's coming from the legislative, or it's coming from the executive branch of government, when all 3 levels don't even uphold themselves to the standards that they do for the rest of the citizens of the country. That is a major, major problem that I would like to point out to this judge, this Supreme Court judge that should know better, right? But to use Mark Harding's terminology, when everything is judicialized and is transformed into a constitutional issue, the final decision makers become judges, not those who are elected. Court cases tend to be winner take all contests. I would agree with that anyways. And that's not good either, right? If you can win big in court, why compromise through elected institutions? Indeed, political compromise can be seen as unprincipled when one characterizes issues of public policy as questions of constitutional rights. But if we turn away from the practical avenues of political pragmatism into the victory of defeat of litigation as a means to determine public policy, do we not undermine moderation and honorable compromise? That is the concern highlighted with great prescience by Peter Russell. I do not read his critique to be directed against the content of any particular court decision. Rather, it related to the consequences for the operation of democratic institutions of having more and more public policy determined through the judicial process. Well, what of it? For those whose views are shaped by postmodernism and critical theory, pragmatism and moderation by elected officials are not virtues. Rather, they are business as usual within a power structure designed to sustain the discrimination and exploitation that pervade our society. In this view, liberal democracy is not a manifestation of freedom. Rather, it is an instrument of repression. That is a dark view of liberal democracy and Canadian society that I do not share. I'm familiar with Habermas and Marcuse. I have read them. I just don't agree with them. It's a misconception of society. So that's obviously an opinion. My views are akin to those of Cicero, Hanc Retinet, Queso, and Curites, quam vabis tanquam hereditatem majores vestri reliquerent. Preserve, I beseech you, these liberties that your ancestors have left you as an inheritance. Here I speak figuratively rather than literally, as the Roman Senate was an assembly of aristocrats, and the liberties of Romans were confined to those who held citizenship. Nonetheless, the figurative point remains. Many of the liberties protected by the Charter did not begin in 1982. They were part of our heritage. Well, that's something that I wish Canadians actually understood. As not part of the heritage that was passed on by your parents or people that lived in your particular geographical landmass prior. No, your liberties, which is why, like I say, these judges need to explain these things properly. Your liberties are a function, right, of you just being born. Nobody should be born into slavery or as a serf, subject, or a slave to any particular ruling class. You have inherent and inalienable rights to be a free human being. That should be something that should be hammered away first and foremost. But once again, you're not going to get that kind of stuff from someone who was a functionary of the state, of the system. In 1872, Benjamin Disraeli, speaking as a partisan, which I do not, contrasted the opposites of a confederacy of nobles and a democratic multitude. Instead of these opposites, Disraeli spoke of one nation, formed from all the numerous classes in the realm, classes equal before the law, but whose different conditions and different aims give vigor and variety to the national life. This combination, Disraeli concluded, is the best security for public liberty and good government. Disraeli, while being a red Tory in domestic policy, was also an arch imperialist. Thus, I embrace his words as an expression of domestic purpose, especially as to the obligations of mutual support within society. From that perspective, does not his vision of one nation continue to embody wisdom, even as the aspirations of that nation change with time? Over time, liberal democracies are able to understand themselves differently, to adapt, become more inclusive, and aspire to be more just. The structure of our institutions, the principle of our laws, and the good faith of citizens can serve us well as society appreciates new perspectives. Thereby, step by step, meaningful progress can be achieved. I have confidence in the democratic system. One can readily point to the failings of Canada and other liberal democracies, just as one can readily conceive of utopian alternatives. But what other system has achieved so great a degree of individual liberty, so high a degree of prosperity, and so open a system in which to pursue justice? Well, see, this is the thing with these judges, and especially the ones as this judge is, who are getting quite on in their years. It's really, really, now I work really hard to do this even in my own personal life, and when I deal with these situations, is don't just think about projecting your own personal experiences, your own anecdotal experiences, right? And the fact that maybe at some point in time in history, right, there were more freedoms available to people in the past. The problem is you just can't use that as a blanket statement to describe, the current paradigm, the current country of Canada that we're living under. We literally had the invocation of the Emergencies Act by the federal Liberals. They broke the law. They targeted what even Trudeau himself suggested was, a small fringe minority of people with what? With just unacceptable views is what he called them. So people that just did not agree with him, and in particular did not agree with a mandate, right? Using force and coercion, right? People being compelled, right, by the state to do things against their will, to put things into their body against their will, or to lose their livelihoods, their jobs, their career. That's the thing. That happened. That took place. The mandates at not just the federal level, but at the provincial level, at the local levels, right down to the corporate level, right? To the businesses who basically just were given this carte blanche, right? Authority, which they never had no pretense of this authority at any point in time in the past. So the fact that, once again, and the media basically, not just gave them the platform and the bullhorn to issue and to put forth these edicts to the public, but then to basically use as apologists and propagandists for the state and going along with it. So to force even more Canadian citizens into compliance. All of that took place just in recent times, just in the last few years. And that's not even taking into account the thousands of other things that I've covered in my, however many, I don't know, was it between one or whatever, however many 1,000+ videos that I've got, videos and live streams that I've got just on my channel alone. And I'm just one person once again, but I can point to thousands and thousands of examples over just the last 10 or 12 years where government actors have not just broken the laws, but did things at a scale that was so harmful that even a ruthless gang of thugs, of let's say biker gangs, would never be able to have the capacity to do nearly as much damage or to cause such rampant destruction and devastation. Now, I get that, like I say, the people that didn't suffer that kind of stuff, and I would imagine this judge, his personal life and the way he's, gets through life, he probably feels that, yeah, this country feels quite free, because to him it is. But this is the problem with perception from people who are part and parcel of the ruling class. That is the case, and has always been in the case, even as he's talking about Roman times. If you were close to the Roman emperor or to Caesar himself, right, you did his biddings, or you even helped prop up the regime, you were probably treated fairly well and probably had a whole lot more freedoms afforded you than the average, serf, subject, or slave at that particular time. And that's the same all the way, if you go all the way back to Roman times, thousands of years ago. And it's the same today in our modern Western advanced democracies. Your subjective experience does not get to override and overrule the fact that there have been millions of Canadians, when you take everything in totality, right? Not just those who are affected by the Emergency Act invocation, or all the mandates and lockdowns and all the restrictions that were imposed on us. Even something as simple as personally, like myself, who had your livelihood, your career upended, and you were criminalized and penalized harshly, I'll add, based on mandatory minimums, for having a few drinks on my four-wheeler, on my ATV, on a trail, in the middle of the woods of New Brunswick, in the sticks, which is where I live. I'm just one of, I don't know how many countless thousands, or probably hundreds of thousands, or maybe even ultimately millions of examples of people who have had their lives completely upended, destroyed, or severely economically harmed in some way, and jailed, imprisoned, for things that actually shouldn't even be considered crimes. I mean, if this judge understands, the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and the fact that the rule of law is supposed to be built and based upon ethics, and the fact that in order for something to be considered an actual crime, that there has to be a victim involved, right? So this is, once again, this is a person that, I mean, at least they tried doing a little bit of pushback, although once again, even the way this was written, right? Not really inspiring at the end of the day, is it? Right? Doesn't give you, I know it doesn't give me a whole lot of hope or faith in the system. Because even, like I say, even the people that, seem to challenge it in some way are not willing to be completely blatantly obvious with the people, right? And why? Of course, I would imagine a lot of it's because fear of reprisal, fear of the consequences for daring to speak openly and forthright about the current situation, the current state of affairs that has taken place, not just in Canada, but in a lot of our Western democracies. You cannot just override what, millions of people have suffered under the hands. Like, once again, I mean, think of any dictatorship or authoritarian collectivist regime, not just in recent times, but once again, let's just go back to the 20th century. The SS, Hitler's henchmen, yeah, they were doing just fine under that regime, right? They themselves would have probably said, hey, I got a pretty good life, getting a good income now, right? Got a good steady job with the government, right? Got myself in a position where I get to fuck with people all day, right? I get to feel like the big man, right? Sure, that's a completely different contrast than the oppressed, right? When you're part of the oppressor class, right, you really shouldn't, or if you are going to enter into this kind of dialogue or talk about this kind of stuff, once again, you should at least have the wherewithal of placing yourself in other people's experiences, or those who are on the losing end against the big government or the state. I would suggest that would be a wise way to approach things, rather than, once again, just using your own personal experiences or anecdotal experiences to talk about these kind of things. Because once again, there's a lot of shit that's taking place in this country, in Canada. I mean, the Trudeau Liberals are basically they're introducing right now something that akin to throwing people in jail for nothing more than a thought crime, for the potential that you might commit a crime at some point in time in the future, right? We're talking Minority Report kind of shit that comes to real life. That's something that's really, really important to talk about. And unfortunately, once again, most people these days are playing the left-right politics, so hell-bent and talk about getting rid of Trudeau that they're not even seemingly worried about, what the implication and the long-term costs to both our social and economic lives with all this constant gradual creeping of big government. Well, like I say, how many laws are on the book now that literally make it so that if they want to target anyone these days, they can do so, and they can find some law somewhere, some act of legislation where they can go after you and punish and penalize you severely if need be, to send a very strong message that don't you dare stand in defiance of your tyrants, of your rulers. Anyways, I'll just finish this off real quick here. Thinkers who are critical of contemporary society and who properly call on us to comprehend historical and contemporary injustices can be dismissive of liberal democratic societies. In their view, how can one value a system under which such wrongs have occurred? And is it not necessary to create a new system so as to ensure that further wrongs do not occur? To this, my response is that liberal democracy is a vessel that is filled by successive generations with the aspirations of that generation. As those aspirations change, so will the outputs of the system. Ours is a good country, one that warrants our devotion, but such devotion needs to be founded on a mature understanding of history and how people in all of Canada's diversity live today. We should not tell ourselves comforting fairy tales, just as we should avoid empty negative rhetoric. Rather, we should seek to live in an inclusive and fair society while being practical and realistic. So anyways, like, once again, I just think that this keynote address was a big old fail. I'm glad I didn't pay to actually to listen to it, because once again, so he's basically suggesting, right? I mean, look at the demographic makeup and how it's shifting now, and especially with mass immigration playing a huge pivotal role in terms of changing and affecting the culture of this country. We're definitely seeing, and this seems to be just a fact, so not just the old stock Canadians, in which I'll say there are plenty of those that are guilty of that as well, and I've pointed this out a gazillion times in the past, that yeah, a lot of old stock Canadians are very much against promoting or defending not just their liberties, but the liberties of their fellow citizens, right? That's a reality that we've seen that is striking and disturbing to people like myself, and should rightfully so for future and successive generations who got to live under these regimes. But if you think about the kind of people now who are dominating in terms of coming to this country from foreign countries and filling up, the voting spots or the voting booths these days, right? These are people who come from countries who, and if you just listen to the way they talk, once again, no false accusations, no baseless insults, just an acknowledgement of listen to the way they talk in terms of the respect for freedom of speech and stuff, and tolerance and respecting the rule of law or the supremacy of God. Well, once again, when you got people who are coming from completely different countries who either have no faith at all, don't share the faith in God, right? Or at least the same God, and have a completely different outlook in terms of how the separation between the church and the state, right? Or once again, their ideas in terms of how to run society. This is the problem with this multiculturalism and this diversity. Well, you can have diversity of some things. There's some things that you can be diverse. But when it comes to having a cohesive, unified society, no, there are some things there cannot be any divergence whatsoever. I'll use the example I like to use, I haven't used in a while, as if you were going to sit down and play even just something as simple as a board game, right? Well, the only way that people will agree to play that board game, right, even if they win or lose, is if everybody agrees that every participant, like there could be lots of diversity in terms of the people playing, let's say Monopoly. Let's say there's 8 people sitting down to play Monopoly, right? And you got all the identity politics covered, basically. So you got someone from the LGBT community, you got a black, you got an indigenous, right? People of color, you got a Muslim, you got a Jew, you got white person, you got an Asian person, you got I don't know, whatever, Hindu, all the different, whether their cultural practices, the religion, and their, just their skin color, women, men, right? Old, young, you get all that diversity. But the only way that all those diverse people could sit down and play that game, right? And actually, where things could be considered that, okay, we're all being treated on a fair and equal basis, is if everybody had to follow the exact same rules of the game. The minute any one person gets to, avoid or escape having to follow the same rules that everyone else has to follow, well, then that's the automatic spot where, okay, now that's where tyranny lies, right? That's when you're living in an unjust system. And that's the kind of world that we live in today. Like I say, no matter if you're talking at the federal level, the provincial level, the local level, private sector, public sector, right? Voting, non-voting, there is no unity in this country. The kind of diversity, and that's the other thing, the equity, like equality of opportunity, I think most reasonable and sensible people can get on board with. Equality of outcome, now some people will get on board with that, especially the losers particularly, right? But winners, or people that strive to attain or achieve great things through, robust efforts, productivity, the sweat of their brow, hard work, competence, right? What they bring to the table. Those people don't want to function. I'm one of them in any world that resembles equity. So if I put in a whole lot of hard work and this other person doesn't, no, we should not be treated equitably. We should not, reach the same social economic status. No, I should make more money if I work harder, right? Or longer, whichever, or than someone who works less or for fewer amount of hours, right? That's where this diversity, this equity, and this inclusive shit, it falls by the wayside. Sounds good in theory, or at least for the first couple of seconds, because it doesn't take a whole lot of time for a reasonable, common sense person to just think, no, that can't work. That can't work. But once again, the kind of system we live in, which is representative of all three levels of government. Once again, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive branch, and that's permeated through all of the institutions. So, like I say, education, healthcare, the bureaucracy of the state in terms of licensing, right? Environmental policy, all that stuff is now done under the lens of not just identity politics, but through this woke diversity, equity, and inclusion, where basically it's a fast track race to the lowest common denominator. And it's a race to the bottom where, once again, it is not even remotely resembling what you would respect or expect in terms of having a free democratic society. I personally don't think that you can have such thing as freedom when you have people ability to vote to take away your stuff or to socially or economically control you. That is the antithesis of having a well-adjusted free society. So until we can get to that point where, once again, from the very top, from these branches of government and the bureaucracies and the institutions that function under it by way of mandates and edicts or by acts of legislation, until these kind of cultural aspects can be changed, once again, I'm not for tearing things down, but I'm definitely not in line with just allowing these institutions to continue on the way they are and function the way they are, or shifting to just meet not some threshold that would unify a country in terms of the ideas that represent universal ethics and how we should treat each other, something along the lines of libertarian philosophy or principles. No, but based on the whims of what particular group has the plurality of votes in your particular culture or your multicultural societies, right? Because then it's just gangs, warring factions, battling against each other, vying for the almighty power of the state to use to impose their will on each other. And in that scenario, which is what we're functioning under today, I mean, yeah, you might be fine if you're in that majority, or even if it's a plurality or a minority, if you're in the dominant position of power, right? If you're in control of the proverbial gun in the room, aka the state, then yeah, things might be good for you. But once again, that is not always and forever going to be the case. That's what's going to shift, right? The people who might be enjoying that particular kind of freedom today because they're the ones that's wielding all the power or supporting those who are wielding all the power. Wait till you find out how bad things can get when the people you've been tyrannizing or oppressing, get to the point where they're now forming majorities, right? And then they want to seek out revenge or retaliate against what you did to them. Wait till you see how bad that gets. And like I say, in this kind of world we're living in today, where this is actually taking place in real time, we need to be thinking about how important this stuff is. Anyways, I'll just get into the comment section here because, like I said, I just wanted to cover that article. And I will just, I don't know if you want to know this, I will include another CBC video of this Justice Rowe on why he wants to be on the Supreme Court. But anyway, so like I say, I am kind of appreciative of the fact that there is at least some semblance of talk about this stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not nearly good enough. So once again, and I hate to say this, I sound like a broken record, but we're kind of on our own here, folks. There's no saviors that are coming from the political class, from the judiciary, or from Pierre Poilievre if he forms government. Now he's saying some great things, right? Of course, Trudeau did the same thing before him. And so did every other politician who was running for power in this country before them, whether they were conservative, NDP, Green, Liberal, right? All the establishment parties, they all promise the world. That's literally how they get the people on board to voting for them. And even more so these days is not just the fake promises that they put forth and the fact that, hey, I'll steal from this person and give to you, right? The promise of redistribution of wealth and income. They're propping you up against other people's expense. But they also, wait 1 sec here. Okay, I just wanted to close this up. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that. But anyways, like I said, I'm just going to read some of the comments here because I'm probably going to tie this live stream up, not keep it going too long. Oh, Brian Peckford, thanks, 506 Adventure. Yes, Brian Peckford, yes. And, like I say, well, even a guy like him, and he was part of the drafting, like he was one of the draftees of the Canada's Bill of Rights, Charter Bill of Rights and Freedoms. And even he said, the invocation of the Emergency Act was never meant for this kind of stuff, right? And he was one of the framers, but yet even his opinion doesn't seem to hold any weight. So that tells you just how corrupted the system is when even one of the original framers and drafters of the Bill of Rights in Canada, right? I think the only one left alive, when even his perspective doesn't matter and just, it's all interpreted by legalese and a bunch of, snake fork tongue lawyers. I mean, this is the situation you find yourself in today. Which, like I say, it's going to be rough here, folks, before it gets better because there's just nobody seemingly willing to talk about the things that need to be talked about. Or actually, I should say at this point in time, talking is about the only thing that many people are getting done. And I'll even count myself a bit in that in terms on any grand scale. But I will say in my own personal life, no. Trust me, what you folks don't see in terms of how I've affected not just my personal life, but the lives of the people who are directly influenced or involved in my life. Yes, a lot of great changes, very positive changes have taken place. And I am very, very much not just appreciative of that, but thankful to carry that on and keep that torch of liberty burning bright for anyone, like I say, in my own immediate vicinity or immediate family, or those, like I say, that I care about. But once again, a lot today, and I'm even seeing this myself with the whole left versus right thing, is everyone seems to just want to run to one of their particular sides, right? Play that whole thing and just sit there and function in their echo chambers all day long. And me, I don't like doing that, which is why I end up, like I say, finding myself in this strange situation that I find myself in today, where I'm a very small voice among a very small minority of people who are trying desperately to get our voices out there and to start talk to people who maybe have some resources at their disposal to help counter some of the kind of shit that's taking place. But once again, the people that have the resources at their disposal seem to have created their own function or their own echo chamber these days, and don't seem to really care about the fact that what happens to people like you or I. A lot of them actually seem to be, as long as they're making bank off of it, doing fine economically as a consequence, right? It started out predominantly, it was the left, right? Because they were the dominant creatures in the culture these days, dominating the culture big time and making bank and getting economically rewarded for doing so, right? A lot of it, of course, by way of government, using government as a means to an end. But you're even seeing people that are much more entrepreneurial in nature, people that would be on the opposite side there, on the right side of the political spectrum, who have created themselves not just alternative media outlets, which once again, it's great that there are alternative media outlets out there. I'm very appreciative of the fact that there are alternative media outlets out there. But all it's doing now is giving, once again, the anti-leftists or the right-wingers, right, their own ability to function in their own echo chambers. While everything, the ruling class just seems to go along doing whatever the hell they want to do, and everyone just seems to be seemingly fine, just functioning in the echo chambers and patting each other on the back on a daily basis. But yet, Rome continues to fall, so to speak, right? Things continue to get worse on a regular daily basis almost. But yeah, it seems that as long as everybody, can sit and, hammer out their grievances amongst other like-minded souls, apparently that seems to be enough for most people. I would just say that should not be enough, right? There has to be a point in time, right, when you're being ruled over by tyrants or people that actively seek out these positions as a means to micromanage, dictate, and control every aspect of your social and economic life. When you have that kind of threat, right, that's ever encroaching on you on such a regular basis, well, at some point in time, the words just might not be enough, right? And that's the uncomfortable, disturbing part of this whole thing is people have become very much too lax, too apathetic, and too comfortable allowing all this shit to take place as long as they can sit and listen to their favorite, podcaster, personality, or influencer. And like I say, a lot of these people who are in these positions, whether they're in the alternative media or some of these pundits or the people that have their own shows or podcasts, yeah, they're saying all kinds of things that whip up people's angst and anger and vitriol against their opponents on the other side of the political divide. So the right-wingers are doing a great job these days, whipping up the anger and resentment and frustration with their political opponents on the left, the woke crowd, the progressives. But what are they doing? What is that translating into at the end of the day, other than just what? A struggle session? Sounds a whole lot like the right these days want to have their own safe spaces. That's basically what I see today, and that kind of makes me think about and remember, and that quote is so applicable, folks, that basically conservatives truly are progressives driving the speed limit. Because look, they're basically getting to be in the same position, and even when they gain power, make no mistake about it, right? Whether you're talking about it in Canada, the US, or make no mistake about it, those who represent the establishment, regardless of which side of the political divide they come from, you're not going to see no massive increase in your freedoms or in your prosperity. Not anytime soon, folks. And once again, I mean, not like I got a crystal ball, but I guarantee what I say will be proven to be 100% truthful, because they've kind of figured it out these days is just keep people in the struggle sessions, in their echo chambers, keep feeding them enough red meat to keep them hungry, right? Keep them coming back for more, and just continue on, carry on, right? Carry on, folks, carry on. Meanwhile, once again, like I say, things are just crumbling all around us. And once again, people aren't willing to engage. Like I say, how you'll know when things are finally starting to shift towards things for the good is when both sides of the establishment are willing to engage with people like myself, have some of the uncomfortable positions that they take, or those comfortable positions that they take, and some of that rhetoric they use to function in their echo chambers, have some of those bubbles burst. Because until that happens, until that takes place, well, I see complacency and apathy reigning supreme for the foreseeable future. I'll be still here waiting, obviously, as patient as one can be, considering the fact that, yeah, I don't just have, sons that are functioning in the system, but, I'll have grandparents and hopefully grandkids and hopefully great grandkids at some point in time that I really need to concern myself with. And so do people like yourself. If you have kids or grandkids yourself, we need to think about their futures, not just our immediate futures, but theirs as well. And like I say, the more time goes by, the more time, flies on by. It like I say, it doesn't seem like, even for me, it seems like 10 or 12 years, the kind of time I put on into talking about this stuff and dealing with things from the philosophical lens. It seems like that time has gone by quite rapidly, to be honest with you. And I really do worry that, another 10, 12 years might go by, and I can't even imagine if it does without anything else happening other than people just finding their little comfort safety zones, their safe spaces where they can do their struggle sessions or grievance studies, right? And pat each other on the back. I just can't imagine how bad things could possibly get while everyone is distracted and doing those things. I imagine things can get a whole lot worse. And as things continue to get worse, the further you fall, the further you got to climb back out of it as well, right? Anyways, I'm just going to check on a few more comments. Then I'll tie this stream up. But once again, I really appreciate all you folks that did join the live stream. Really grateful for that. So 506 Adventure, he was part of drafting the Charter of Rights in Canada. Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, dead on with that one. Thanks for that too. Have not heard anything. Oh, you guys must be talking to each other. Hey, Mad Catter, what's going on? Hello to you. Thank you. Anyways, like I say, I really appreciate you fine folks who did join the live stream. Once again, this was I didn't want to keep this one too long. Wanted to at least cover this particular thing. And there's some more stuff I got coming up. Actually, if you folks wouldn't mind, maybe in a follow-up comment, because once I tie up the live stream, I don't see the actual chat on the side once I tie up the live stream, although I can watch it a little bit later on, I think. But if you folks, whether you do it in the chat section or as a standalone comment below, whether it's, like I say, whether it's on Rumble, YouTube, or X, or Facebook, or Odyssey, is just let me know. Would you rather I kind of predominantly do what I do, where I deal with things predominantly myself, or are you folks more interested in maybe me bringing on guests? Because that's something that actually, I've been kind of contemplating myself, is should I start getting more into bringing guests on and maybe talking about things? Or here's another thing. So once again, I've been back reading this. I'm not sure. Well, a few folks have ever read it. And actually, it's not that long of a book. What is it? 47 pages, I believe. A little more than that. Maybe... Actually, a little more than that. So what would it be? Maybe 60 pages or so, but it's the Communist Manifesto. And I'm just interested to know if you guys, in addition to if you'd like me to interview guests, but if you'd also like me to maybe read some of the smaller books that don't take as long to read and maybe do a synopsis or a summary or things as it pertains to those books. Because I will just point out, I was thinking about doing a whole live stream as it pertains to the Communist Manifesto, and talk about the 10 core tenets of the Communist Manifesto. And you folks, those who've already read this or who are privy to the information contained in the Communist Manifesto, already aware that of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, I would say the majority of them have already been implemented in our Western, so-called capitalist democracies, which not really so capitalist after all, right? There's some underlying aspects of capitalism, right? There's some residue left of capitalism underneath, right? Which helps prop up the rest of the structure, which is based and built upon authoritarian collectivism, a mix mash of them. So it's not full communist, right? There's a little mixture of fascism, a little mixture of socialism, a little mixture of communism, a little mixture of Nazism, right? All kinds of authoritarian collectivists have kind of gathered round the table, so to speak, and actually are dominating our cultures in so many areas. And it's coming through these institutions, right? And how they bring about these systems that become the permanent bureaucracy is by implementing those 10 tenets of the Communist Manifesto. Because as they even knew themselves, is, you can vote politicians away, but when it comes to the institutions, the underlying structures that prop it up, right? The bureaucracy, those are unelected, and those are basically there as a permanent feature of the system. So anyways, like I say, if you folks just let me know, is it something that you'd be interested in terms of like me just reading some of these shorter books? Because the longer books would be a lot harder for me to do in terms of doing a summary or a synopsis kind of thing. But if you folks are interested, like I say, not just me doing interviews, but also if I read a bunch of my books and then just kind of go through them in a live stream with you folks, is that something that you would be interested in? Because at least it's getting away from just the monotony of dealing with the issues of the day, and get more into stuff that's really pertaining to ideas and things that really spark the intellect in your minds, right? So once again, just let me know. Oh, go with your flow, brother. Keep it on the table, right on. Well, thank you very much, Mad Catter. I will do. But anyways, really appreciate you folks join the live stream. I'm going to tie this up now. I'll see you in the next one. Like I say, just let me know in the comment section what you think I should do going forward. Like I say, I'm still going to continue doing some of this stuff, but I'd like to expand my presence a little bit if I can. Anyways, you folks have yourself a great day. This is Canadian Libertarian, and I love